So, the winter 2025 season of anime has ended, and my god, did it fly by. And well, some shows like season 2 of Apothecary Diaries are going to keep running into the spring season of 2025, but that's pretty much it, and thus we got pretty much an entirely new slate of anime that we're staring down the barrel of in this upcoming season. And it's gonna be a pretty big season. See, well, there's no mega anime dropping in the spring 2025 season like Solo Leveling or JJK. It is a season filled either with anticipated season 2s, promising anime originals, the first seasons of anticipated anime adaptations, and maybe more importantly than anything, the long-awaited return of one of the most beloved shonen on Earth. So, do I think that the spring season is probably going to be our worst season of anime this year? Yeah, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that it's gonna be a bad season, as there is at least 4 sure-to-be certified bangers in this upcoming season. So, we got a lot to be excited about. On top of that, the spring season is bringing us an anime movie that I've been excited for a year. And thus, the spring season, being possibly the weakest season of the 2025 anime calendar year, is less about the weakness of its own schedule and rather more about the strength of all the other seasons. And thus, today I want to help you get hyped up for this upcoming anime season by giving you all of the information that you need to know about the upcoming hit anime titles coming out in early April. That way, when you dive back into shows like Windbreaker or Fire Force, you can remember where we left off and know when to anticipate. Or when you jump into shows like Vigilante or Lazarus, you'll know what you're wading into in these relatively new pieces of IP. So with no further ado, let's get directly into everything that you need to know heading into the spring 2025 anime season. But before we get to shaking off the cold of the winter 2025 season, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So we got 5 titles coming out this spring that I want to talk about in this video. 4 TV shows and 1 movie. So let's approach this video in the way that I tend to approach these seasonal breakdown videos, by starting with the titles that I'm least excited about and slowly but surely making my way up to titles that I'm the most excited about. Now, I'm gonna be real. Before I hop into my first title here, every single one of the anime coming out in this spring 2025 season that we're gonna be talking about today, I am very excited about. In fact, I can't imagine after the season is all said and done that any of the anime we're about to talk today, I would give a rating of anything lower than an 8 out of 10. And thus, when I say that I'm the least excited to talk about this one in particular title, that doesn't mean that I don't think it's gonna be good. This is just a season of pretty good anime. Nothing spectacular, but pretty good. And thus, technically, the show out of the 4 we're gonna be talking about today that I'm the least excited for coming up in the spring 2025 season is Windbreaker's 2nd season. You guys know from basically every single time that I've ever talked about Windbreaker, I'm a massive Windbreaker fan. In fact, I was one of the first people to identify after watching Windbreaker's trailer that it stood a legitimate chance at becoming one of the most popular delinquent animes of all time. And as Windbreaker is currently sitting at the 3rd most anticipated anime coming into the spring 2025 season over other highly anticipated titles like Vigilante or Lazarus, that just goes to show you how incredibly well received Windbreaker's first 12 episodes were. And that's because Windbreaker's first 12 episodes were incredible. Cloverworks did an absolute masterful job of adapting the first season of this delinquent manga, giving us some of the most fluid and well choreographed fights I've ever seen in anime, and thus giving us hope that the Tokyo Revengers size hole in our heart is going to be filled and soon, as what Windbreaker lacks in terms of comparison to Tokyo Revengers, it makes up for in terms of being better animated and better choreographed. And for 2 shows revolving around children beating the hell out of each other, believe it or not, a well choreographed, fluid looking fight is semi-important. Now, season 2 is kind of just going to be a bit more of what season 1 gave us, which tends to be the trappings that delinquent anime fall into. That is to say that instead of the bad guys in this season being Shishitoren, and this season the bad guys are a group named Keel. And while Shishitoren was led by evil men who didn't believe that weakness had any place in their gang, and therefore a lot of the members of Shishitoren lived in relative fear of the top members of their group, eventually led to a tournament-style fight between Shishitoren and Bofurin. This season's gonna revolve more around an all-out battle between the new bad group, which is known as Keel, and Bofurin. And while that might sound slightly repetitive, oh, it's just Bofurin fighting against different delinquent groups, fortunately this season, revolving around more of an all-out battle against a different delinquent group, allows for more members of Bofurin to shine as opposed to when they were in their tournament battle against Shishitoren, as only 5 members from Bofurin were able to fight in this tournament in the first place. And therefore, if you've been curious about some of the more background characters from Bofurin, like Sakura's classmates or even those who are in grades above him, then this season does a really good job of diving into those characters, showing their backstories and also their fighting styles. And thus, while the season is definitely going to give us a little bit of the same, that's kind of just delinquency anime. And based off everything we've seen in terms of trailers, it looks as though this season season is going to be just as beautifully animated as the first, so you won't hear me complaining. On top of that, the first episode comes out April 4th, making it our first drop of this anime season. And it will, like its first season, most likely be about 12 episodes long. But now that we got Windbreaker out of the way, let's talk about an anime coming out in the spring 2025 season for all the old heads watching this video right now. Lazarus. Listen, do you feel as though anime hasn't been the same since the good old Toonami days? Do you yearn for the days when you had to stay up way past your bedtime to watch Cowboy Bebop? Do you miss the dopamine hit of watching Samurai Champloo for the first time? Do you miss when anime had real soundtracks that sounded like jazz albums? Then boy oh boy, is Lazarus gonna be the anime for you. MAPPA, who's gonna be animating Lazarus, is putting all of the old heads in a time capsule and sending them back to 2004. And while this is not the first time, especially in recent years, that a time capsule anime has dropped, as The Great Pretender dropped a couple of years ago to roaring success, I think Lazarus may be even more early 2000s coded than The Great Pretender. See, Lazarus is an anime original story, there is no manga, that takes place in 2052 in a utopian human society, largely predicated on the fact that a man by the name of Dr. Skinner developed a miracle painkiller that once taken would basically eradicate you from ever feeling pain again. And thus a vast, and I mean vast majority of human society has taken this miracle painkiller. I mean, I got a knot in my shoulder right now that I would pay $1 million to stop feeling. However, about 2.5 years after the release of this drug, Dr. Skinner got on the horn and took over every TV in the world, told everybody on Earth that this miracle drug actually has a 3-year half-life. And at the end of that 3-year half-life, the drug will degrade into a chemical compound that will kill anybody who ever took it. And thus humanity has 30 days to find Dr. Skinner and get the cure from him. So our main character Axel, who is voiced by Mamoru Miyano, aka Dazai, Light, Okabe from Steins Gate, Death the Kid from Soul Eater, and Benny Maru from Fire Force, oh, and Crollo from Hunter x Hunter, has to work with a task force of 5 secret agents called Lazarus to find Dr. Skinner and to get the cure. And if all of that doesn't sound enticing enough to get you interested in the idea of Lazarus, it was also created and is going to be directed by Shinichiro Watanabe, also known as the creator of Cowboy Bebop, which is why he also brought on his co-writer Dai Sato, who helped him write Cowboy Bebop. Dai Sato has done a lot more than just write Cowboy Bebop. Let me go ahead and just read you some of his credits. He's been involved in the writing of basically every single Ghost in the Shell project, Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, Wolf's Rain, Eureka 7, Eden in the East, and Space Dandy. And as if I was going to actively compare Lazarus to any anime that are currently out, the 3 that I would most likely compare him to are Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, and Space Dandy. Dai Sato as a writer is a pretty good person to have involved in this project. But it goes further than that because, like I've already established, MAPPA is going to be animating Lazarus, and this is the only project they're working on in the spring 2025 season. But on top of all of that, Chad Stileski, also known as the director of all 4 John Wick movies, is actually in charge of creating the action sequences for this anime. On top of that, the soundtrack is being created by 3 legendary jazz musicians, Kamasi Washington, Bonobo, and Floating Points. And thus, if you want a show that's gonna look and act like Cowboy Bebop animated in 2025 level of animation, then look literally no further than Lazarus. This is a show for all the weebs out there whose bones hurt. But maybe this 13-episode anime will make us forget about that for at least a couple of months. Also, as a cherry on top of all of this, this anime is going to be dropping on Adult Swim, and therefore there's a fairly good chance that the English and Japanese versions are dropped simultaneously. So you'll have your pick of the languages of which you want to watch it in. After Lazarus, we have a project that I am very excited for, but it feels as though the public isn't. That's because next up, we got to talk about the first season of Vigilante dropping, also known as Vigilante Boku no Hero Academy Illegals, or My Hero Academia Vigilantes. Now, one would assume, I guess inaccurately, that a spin-off show of one of the most popular anime and manga of all time would be highly anticipated. However, in this upcoming season, Vigilantes comes in at number 5 in terms of people waiting to watch it, behind things like Lazarus, Season 2 of Windbreaker, and I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed out my levels Season 2. And maybe this is because My Hero Academia has been fading in popularity over the last couple of years, or simply because some people don't know that this IP exists. But it does, and it's very good, and it's also already over. Yeah, Vigilantes, the My Hero Academia spin-off story, actually finished before My Hero Academia. But this is because My Hero Academia is 400 plus chapters long, and Vigilantes is only 126 chapters long. Now, for those of you who aren't too familiar with the story of Vigilantes, let's get some of the more important things out of the way here first. 1. This is a story that takes place 5 years prior to Deku's story in MHA. That is to say that this story takes place during All Might's prime, before he's injured in his battle against All for One. 2. While the original concept for the story was created by Horikoshi, the mangaka of MHA, it's actually done by Hideyuki Furuhashi. Now, I actually don't know how Hideyuki Furuhashi got selected to be the author of Vigilantes, because he was never one of Horikoshi's assistants. But he did write the slightly popular K manga that some of you may know prior to writing Vigilantes, anime adaptation in 2012. It's also known as K Project. Now, Vigilantes is a really fun read, especially if you're a My Hero Academia fan, as it takes a very different approach to the My Hero universe than My Hero Academia. See, because even though 80% of people in the My Hero Academia universe are born with quirks, a vast majority of those people aren't allowed to use their quirks, as there's laws stopping people from using their quirks in unregulated fashions. However, as we've seen in MHA, it's kind of difficult to become a licensed hero, as even kids in hero programs at esteemed hero high schools have difficulty getting their licenses. And thus, when kids like Koichi, who is the main character of Vigilantes, grow up wanting to be a hero, but unfortunately either don't have the ability or the means to make that a possibility, a lot of wannabe heroes just have to watch real licensed heroes bask in the spotlight that they wish they had themselves. And thus Koichi, because of his mediocre quirk sliding, which essentially just makes the ground ice for him that he can slide around on like he's wearing ice skates, has to fulfill his desire to be a hero simply by completing menial good tasks, like helping elderly people across the street or returning lost items to people. It's nothing impressive. However, one day when Koichi is saved by a vigilante hero known as Knuckle Duster, who's essentially Vigilante's version of All Might, Knuckle Duster identifies that there's a hero laying in wait inside of Koichi. Thus, he recruits him to help him track down a dangerous drug known as Trigger that amplifies the power of people's quirks but makes them evil and crazy. And thus, this story follows the likes of Koichi and Knuckle Duster and a bunch of other vigilantes as they try to do good for the MHA world while also ducking the law that's trying to lock them away for using their powers in an unlicensed fashion. It is a much grittier, darker, more grounded story based in the MHA universe, with I dare say, more likable main character. And so, if you're a fan of MHA, you're obviously gonna be a fan of Vigilantes, but even if you're not a fan of MHA, this story takes the heroes out of the classroom and puts them on the street, in what I would identify as a more relatable backdrop. On top of that, there is a fair amount of bleed over between MHA and Vigilantes in terms of character cameos, because mind you, the story only takes place 5 years before the events of MHA, and therefore while Class 1A isn't old enough to even try to be heroes yet, the teachers of Class 1A and all of UA are relatively involved in this story. So I would highly recommend it for a watch. Now, some good or maybe bad news depending on your view of things. The show is also going to be animated by Bones, who mind you have the final season of MHA coming out in 6 months. So while all of the trailers coming out of Vigilantes have looked pretty good, that is to say at least as good as MHA's more recent seasons, there might be some lag in the animation department. However, considering the fact that Vigilantes is only a 126 chapter manga and Bones tends to do 24 episode seasons in the MHA universe, Vigilantes will probably only end up being about 50 episodes or 2 seasons, and therefore Bones may be able to throw more money at it because it's a shorter project. But regardless, if they do actually go for 24 episodes, as I believe they're going to, we're gonna have MHA content weekly for like the next year, as 24 episodes of Vigilantes would get us directly to MHA's final season, and that's kind of crazy. But with Vigilantes out of the way, what's the anime that I'm most excited for in the spring 2025 season? Fire Force Season 3. Come on. The last episode of Fire Force, episode 48. You want to know when it came out? You want to know? Come here. Come closer. March 2022. And listen, that's only 3 years, which actually isn't that long. And to deliver peak on the level of Fire Force between the animation, the sound design, and just in general the show, I'm assuming takes a fair amount of time. So I'm not upset about it being 3 years since the last episode of Fire Force dropped. But I am very excited that it's back, and also still being animated by the team that did the first 2 seasons, David Productions. Ooh, I don't think I mentioned that Lazarus is coming out April 6th and that Vigilantes is coming out April 7th. That's important because Fire Force is coming out April 5th, which means that our watching rotation in this upcoming season is Windbreaker Fridays, Fire Force Saturdays, Lazarus Sundays, and then Vigilante Mondays. 4 days, 4 episodes. What more could you ask for? Anyways, back to Fire Force. It's been 3 whole years since season 2, but that does mean that David Productions has had 3 whole years to make season 3. And based off everything that they've given us in terms of key images and trailers, it looks like season 3 is going to look as good, if not better, than season 1 and season 2. And with how absolutely insane the events that season 3 is going to cover are about to become, that's very important. See, because for those of you who don't know, Fire Force probably has some of the fastest pacing out of any manga turned anime in modern anime history. If you wanted to pick up the Fire Force manga after the completion of episode 48, the most recent recent episode from Fire Force, you would start with chapter 174, meaning that Fire Force on average adapts about 3.6 chapters of content per episode. For reference, One Piece at its slowest during the Reverie arc was adapting 0.5 chapters of manga per episode of anime, a whole 7 times slower than Fire Force. However, if Fire Force continues on this pace, that means at the end of this inevitably 24 episode season that we're about to get, as both seasons 1 and 2 of Fire Force were both 24 episodes, we will be up to roughly chapter 261 of Fire Force. And considering the fact that Fire Force is only 304 chapters long, that would only leave about 45-ish chapters left to be adapted, which would fit perfectly into a 12 episode season. All that is to say that these 24 episodes that we're about to get from Fire Force are actually the penultimate season, the second to last, as this season will lead us perfectly into one final 12 episode season. But it has been 3 whole years since Fire Force dropped, so what happened in the previous arcs and what should we expect in this upcoming season? Well, for those of you who don't remember, the most recent arc that was covered in the Fire Force anime in season 2 is the Stigma arc, which covers from chapters 167 to 174 in the manga. This arc opens with Yona, an inhabitant of the Adola and one of the evangelists, instructing the White Clad to find people who have experienced an Adola link. And it's this point that it's revealed that Conroe, the lieutenant of the Special Fire Force Company 7, Benimaru's company, had been on the receiving end of an Adola link in the past, and therefore was most likely in danger of being targeted by the evangelists. And thus Shinra and Hibana travel to Asakusa, where Team 7 reigns over. Hibana is the captain of Company 5, mind you, the really pretty one who likes to call people trash. And when they finally find Conroe, they see that he's actually recently just cut down an assassin from the evangelists with a blade, and thus now realizing that he's safe, they ask him about the Adola link that he's experienced, which leads Conroe to telling them the story about when he fought against a demon infernal 2 years ago, and after he killed it, he experienced an Adola link, which leads to the reveal of the concept of super fire, a ridiculously high-powered fire attack that's able to affect the evangelists and demon infernals. And as Benimaru and Conroe are really the only known people able to use this super fire, multiple members of Company 8 are sent to Asakusa to train with Company 7, and thus Arthur and Shinra train with Benimaru, and Tamaki, who tagged along with the two of them, starts training with the two twins from Company 7, Hinata and Hikage. This training looks like Tamaki trying to run away from the twins for a whole minute, and Arthur and Shinra just trying to land a hit on Benimaru. Now, through this training with Benimaru, Arthur and Shinra become aware of a couple of concepts: the breath of life and the pressure of death, two heightened emotional states that allow them to make their fire burn even hotter, and thus two things that are absolutely essential in accessing super fire. All the while, Tamaki pushes her fire neko form to its absolute limits until eventually she's able to evade them for a full minute. However, Shinra is battling against Benimaru for 5 whole hours. Eventually, he overheats, at which point he begins to be surrounded by the flames of Adola, and he sees amongst these flames a vision of his demon infernal mother holding Sho, his brother, who's now one of the pillars of the evangelists. And thus, in this moment, Shinra begins to make connections to what happened on the fateful night of his family's demise, and thus he realizes that he needs power to be able to persevere over his enemies and get his brother back, and thus he awakens to new powers, essentially the super fires, which grants him abilities slightly on par with that of Benimaru, making them able to fight on equal footing. And while everybody is off training, the story also reminds us that Captain Haig has also once experienced an Adola link, and thus one of the last things that we saw at the end of season 2 was Captain Haig fighting against the self-proclaimed butcher of the evangelists, who stabs him and strings him up. Now, the upcoming arcs of Fire Force are going to revolve around the evangelists more than any previous arcs, and while that sounds kind of crazy because the evangelists have always been the bad guys, it's pretty much from Haig's death on that the evangelists truly take a step into the light as the real bad guys of this story. However, the evangelists, or the White Clad, aren't the only bad guys that we're going to be dealing with in this season. As for those of you who have already seen the trailer, you'll see that for some reason it appears as though Company 8 has come up against Company 1, or more specifically, Leonard Burns, the captain of Company 1, believed to be the strongest fighter that any of the Fire Forces have access to. And yes, this season is going to see a lot of action from Fire Force Company 1, and that's because Fire Force Company 1 is directly controlled by the Holy Soul Temple, who are revealed in Season 2 to have some possibly nefarious beginnings and possibly nefarious intentions, most specifically in the Iris arc, where we saw Iris struggling with her faith in the Holy Soul Temple, mostly because what gets revealed about Raffles through the Demon Infernal arc. Now, I am going to be making an entire video dedicated to getting you guys ready for Fire Force Season 3, where I not only go over what happened in Season 1 and Season 2, but also briefly go over some of the big story points that are going to happen in Season 3, the characters that are going to be involved, and how their powers work. But for the moment, what you guys need to know in this more broad episode is that the first arc that we're going to be dealing with in Season 3 is known as Obi's Rescue Arc. It's going to show that the White Clad and Company 1 are moving in lockstep, and that they're moving in lockstep against Company 8. As in Season 3, Company 8 are going to be branded as traitors, and Captain Obi is going to be arrested. And thus, Company 8 is going to have to scuttle underground to avoid the law, the Holy Soul Temple, and find a way to break Obi out of prison. The season will most likely end with the Battle of Amaterasu arc, which ends with Chapter 250. As more likely than not, the showrunners for Fire Force will want the Great Cataclysm arc, the second to final arc, if you include the epilogue arc, to stand as its own season. But if you want more info on everything you're going to need about Fire Force, keep an eye out for our dedicated Fire Force video. And with that, that's all the anime that I am excited about coming out in the spring 2025 season. I mean, yes, we're getting the second season of Go Go Loser Ranger, which I had high hopes for, but the first season was awful, kind of. Maybe awful is not the right word, but it just wasn't what I wanted it to be. It was confusing, the characters were kind of weird, whatever. We're getting a new season. We're also getting a new season of Black Butler, but it feels like we get a new season of Black Butler every 6 months nowadays. Really exciting project coming out of China called To Be Hero X, being created by Billy and Aniplex. And one of the animation studios behind it, Land Studios, are the creators of one of my favorite anime of all time, Link Click, which explains, like with Link Click, that every single trailer that we've gotten from this soon-to-be anime looks absolutely gorgeous. See, not only does it look gorgeous in a traditional, well-animated anime style, but it appears as though multiple different genres of animation are being smashed together depending on the character that we're following after. There's a noir dog hero that when you're following it, apparently in the story, the animation style becomes much more comic-like. But with other characters who are more anime-centric, the animation looks more akin to high-level Link Click. But that's the real power of what appears to be one of the more hype projects coming out of China in a couple of years. Because it appears as though the cast of To Be Hero X is massive, with the third trailer showing us 10 plus heroes that are going to play central roles in this story. Because in fact, this is not only a donghua, meaning it's coming from China, but also an original donghua, meaning it doesn't have a story to be read. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information on what this story is going to be like. All we know is what the trailers have told us. And what we've learned from the trailers is that this is a pretty interesting premise. The To Be Hero X universe is a universe where the faith and trust of people on Earth in you makes you into a progressively more and more powerful hero. That is to say, if you are the most popular hero on Earth, then you are the most powerful hero on Earth. And the most powerful hero on Earth is known as X. And thus, in this world, anybody can become a hero so long as they have enough trust. And in this universe, how much trust you have is displayed on your wrist numerically. It is a real calculatable life force. And once you cross a certain threshold, you get to become a hero. Now, is this a thinly veiled metaphor for a social credit system? Maybe, but it also is one of the more unique approaches to a hero universe that I've ever seen, and therefore I'm very excited to watch it. Now, the reason that I didn't count it in the 4 anime I'm excited for is because technically it's a donghua. Is the lie that I would tell you if I really cared what you thought about me. But in actuality, I just forgot it was coming out until I was already done listing those other 4. You think I don't count donghua as anime? I call Castlevania an anime. But with To Be Hero X out of the way, that is well and truly all of the anime that I'm excited for coming up in the spring 2025 season. But there is also an anime movie that I'm very excited for coming out June 27th, therefore at the very end of the spring 2025 season. And that is the anime movie called Virgin Punk, a story that follows a girl by the name of Ubu who wakes up in a hospital with a nearly indestructible body and finds herself thrown into a life as a bounty hunter. And as she wades deeper and deeper into this world of bounty hunters, she gets entangled by more and more dangerous people. Now, I don't know a whole lot about this movie. However, I do know that it's being created by Shaft Animation Studios, aka the people in charge of 2 of the most underrated, incredible anime of all time, Boiler Magi Madoka Magica, and the entirety of the Monogatari universe. 2 projects that are absolutely stunningly gorgeous, which makes sense when you look at literally any of the media that we've gotten from Virgin Punk up until this moment. I mean, it looks breathtaking. It's shiny. The clothes are Stark walking up to a dragon level animated. The action scenes look incredibly choreographed. And maybe more than anything, it looks like an absolute bloodfest. So while this may be the project that I am the least informed about coming into this spring season, you best believe I'm waiting until June for this one. And with that, that's everything I got for the upcoming anime season, guys. What are you most excited for coming out here in a couple of weeks? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go reread the entirety of Fire Force to get ready for a prep video for you.